In today's show, we're going to build a Dataverse table for Power Apps. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a table from scratch. We're going to talk about some of the different column types, why you would use them, how they might be different between model-driven and Canvas apps, and give you some of that foundational knowledge so we can continue to explore Dataverse as the year goes on. But first, here's our intro. Hi, my name is Shane Young with Power Apps 911. Those guys. And today, we're going to talk about Dataverse. And so what we want to do in this video is we're going to talk about what is Dataverse real quick, why you should care about it, which we need to care a lot more about it as we go forward this year. And then we're going to build our first table. We're going to add some columns and we're going to talk about some of the column nuances, right? I could probably do a 4-hour video on all the different types of columns and some of the nuances with them. So we're not going to go super nerdy deep because that would just be overwhelming, but we're going to get at least some of that foundational column knowledge that you guys will need so you can start to understand that how you build these tables kind of affects some things downstream for good and bad. So making sure we kind of have our heads wrapped around that. So that's it. And then of course at the end, we'll have to populate the data a little bit, but that's easy. So anyway, let's switch over to my desktop and take a look. Okay, so over here in the desktop, I'm just at make.powerapps.com. I've logged in. And over here on the left, you have Dataverse, right? So yours might be expanded or contracted, whatever, like that. So if you expand it out, you're going to see you've got some different things here. And so Dataverse, if you're not familiar with it, is this idea that it's the data source of choice for Power Apps. And the reason for that is it is the only one that is native to Power Apps. And what do we mean by that is, so if you'll notice, like when you're in Power Apps, Canvas apps, for example, that you can just add a Dataverse table directly. So there's no connector. Every other data source you add, SQL, SharePoint, Salesforce, Excel, OneDrive, whatever data source you add, other than that, there's this API middleman, which slows down the process just a tad, right? We're all used to that speed, but to that end, that makes Dataverse the fastest possible data source for Power Apps, right? Because it's natively built into the platform. Now, it does have additional licensing requirements. We're going to do a licensing talk today, but it is a premium connector, so you will have to have a premium license to use it in your apps. So consider that. But if you have your choices of any of the data sources, it's probably the first choice because it is the fastest of the data sources. Now, also with Dataverse, one of the things we'll see is that because it is native to Power Apps, the Power Apps team builds it, right? They're working on it. And so almost every new feature shows up inside of Dataverse before it shows up inside of other features, if it ever gets there. Like one of my favorite ones is with relationships. You can dot notate your way through the related data directly using Dataverse. Whereas if you do like SharePoint lookups, then a lookup column, you have to do a lookup function to get the related data in, and it's a lot heavier from a performance standpoint. So things like that, you'll see that things like, some of those advanced features, the like AI Builder, like I totally ate my brain froze, like AI Builder and some of those other features, they all show up using Dataverse behind the scenes. And honestly, a lot of the Power App stuff is stored in Dataverse anyway. So even if you're not using Dataverse, you're using Dataverse. It's already there. So Dataverse is fundamental. The other big thing with Dataverse here is you've got model-driven apps, right? So if you want to take advantage of model-driven apps or portals, both of these are only built on top of Dataverse data. So to go down either one of these roads, you're going to have to commit to Dataverse being your data source and having the licensing that goes with those type of things. But that's important to understand as well as we start to build out solutions, as we start to do more and more of the Power Platform, right? A lot of businesses are kind of dabbled in Power Platform, like, wow, this is like fundamentally changing our business. How do we do more, bigger, better, awesomer things? That's where they're starting to be like, oh, maybe I should check out these model-driven apps. Oh, maybe I should check out portals. Dataverse underlies both of those. So that's why I want to kind of get it into your guys' heads. This is what we're talking about here and why we want to understand it. Now, and remember, Canvas apps are kind of my first love. And so Dataverse is still great, even if you're just in a Canvas app world. It's a premium license. So keep that in mind that Dataverse is the only one that works across all three of these. Whereas Canvas apps, right, we have like 400, 500, 600, 8 million connectors. It can talk to a lot of data sources. Model-driven apps and portals really are just fundamentally built on top of Dataverse. Okay, so that's a lot of why we care. So now that we understand why we probably care, let's go over and build one of these. So over here on the left, if you click on tables, over here you'll be brought in and you're going to see a lot of information. Now, one of the things you'll see, like if you look at the different tables that are already here, you've got some standard, you got managed, you got custom, you got a bunch of weird stuff. the things that you're going to create, right now, if you're watching this video, I'm assuming you're kind of newer to this, you're trying to understand it. Go up here and just hit the drop down and change this to custom. These are the ones that I have built, right? So these are none of the underlying system ones that make things work. It has nothing to do with the common data model. These are just the tables that I've built. So a much simpler view to understand in the beginning. Later on, you're going to want to understand what some of those other tables are, but for today, we're good right here. So to that end, we're going to go up to the top and we're going to say new table. Now, when you see new table, if you're a SharePoint person, which I assume a lot of you are, just think SharePoint list or new table in Excel, right? Or a new table in SQL. It's just a rows and columns of information we want to keep. And so over here with a new table, you give it a display name. And so for this one, I'm going to call this video employees, if I can spell it correctly. Now, one of the weird things, I think, right, Kim? I'm not afraid to tell you some of the things I don't like about Dataverse, is that it has a display name and a plural display name, and it auto-generates both. You can modify both, so video employees, I don't know what that even says, or maybe it wants me to do video employee, and so then the plural name is video employees. These names, they get set. There are certain places as we get deep down the rabbit hole, you have to reference these. So, at least take a second to kind of make sure these make sense to you, what you see. Also, the underlying system name, like we know with SharePoint, we always have the problem with spaces in our field names and such, and how it puts that %_20 garbage in there. So in this case, you can control the name. You're not going to have to use this name very often, but when you do, like if you're programmatically doing like an OData query or something like that, you're going to want to know what it is. So typically speaking, I'm not changing either of these, but you can if you want to, do that. You don't right now though, just don't mess with it. Now there's also a primary name column here. So this is creating your first column. So back to my SharePoint world, you always get the title column every time you create a list. Then here, the idea is that you're going to do it. You've got, a chance to set that. So it's just not defaulting to title. It's defaulting to name. You can leave it at name. It doesn't matter. I will tell you that like this one is primarily what shows up in default views. If you have relationships, things like that. So, making this column make sense a little bit might be a good idea. For me, we're going to go ahead and just change this to make it first name, like so. But, it's up to you what you do. Now, also down here, you're going to see you have an option for enabling attachments. You can turn these on later. So whether or not you want this particular table to support attachments for your items, you can turn it on, turn it off, add it later. Don't mess with it. And then if you're going to hit more settings, there is so much in here. Like I said, we could probably spend 2 hours going through all those. We're not going to. I'm not here to overwhelm you. I'm here just to get to the point and build this first table. But be sure to check those out as you expand your knowledge in Dataverse. There's some fun things in there. So this is what we need. We're good. We're going to say create. Now, one of the nice things here is it automatically created it, but it didn't. You can see that it's still provisioning the table in the background, but I can keep going. So I can just jump straight up here to the top and say add column. And then we're going to make the second column be last name. Now, for the first one here, we're going to go with a data type of text. And so text, and then we're going to make it optional. So you have optional or required or recommended. So if you're doing like a model-driven app, a recommended column would be denoted differently than whatever. But if you're building for Canvas apps, this is ignored. So really it's optional or required is what I've used. Lots of other things here. Now, one thing I do want to point out to my SharePointies people, especially if you go down here under advanced, the max length is 100. So your SharePoint single line of text is 255 characters. So if you're trying to do apples for oranges, you might want to change this to 255. And then this can actually be created all the way up to 4,000 is the maximum number of characters you could have. So don't make it 4,000 just because you can. Making it 100 makes a lot of sense. And you can change this after the fact. So 100, we're going to roll with all these default settings. That all looks good. We'll say done. So now we got first name, we got last name. Now you notice that I'm only seeing these two columns that I created, but it told me it was done. So that's because previously when I was messing around, I had changed this setting up here. So remember we talked about only viewing the custom tables on the last screen? Here, you can also change what columns you show. So if you do all, this would show you all the columns, the created by, the owning, the statuses, the modified, all of those crazy columns. So the system columns and the columns I've created. Overwhelming, that's why I like to default to just custom. Show me the columns that I've created. Now keep in mind as well that this last name column is sitting here, but it is not saved. That's why it's in bold. So until I click on Save Table, if I move my face real quick, down here in the bottom right, that column has not actually been added. It's all sitting there waiting, but so that way we can just add all the columns and then save the table all at once. Okay, so that's first name, that's last name. Let's add another column. So add a column here. One more just simple text one. We're going to do title because this is what I have in my SharePoint list. And this is like, CEO, janitor, whatever it might be. All the default settings look good. So we'll say done there. Then we will add another one here and we're going to add age. Now, when I go to add age, I'm going to change my data types here. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, there's a lot of stuff going on here. There is. And so if you look right here, we have under the number section, we have whole numbers. So let's kind of scroll this up a little bit. And so whole number is exactly that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? I am 40, what am I, 44? Yeah, I think 44. I am 44, right? So that's a whole number. So that's where you're going to store your whole numbers in there, which would make a lot of sense in our case for age. If you didn't want to store whole numbers, if you wanted to have numbers with decimals, then down here we have decimal numbers. We also have the ability to use floating point numbers. I understand vaguely the difference between the two. Basically, decimal numbers have a higher level of precision. Floating point numbers are better for scientific calculations, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. If I was trying to store 1.25, I would store it in a decimal number, not a floating point number. I'd probably never touch a floating point number if it was up to me. I'm sure somebody's cringing saying it's a terrible answer, but unless you have a reason, I like decimal numbers. But once again, for age, it is really just a whole number. So let's do whole number. And honestly, we don't really need to mess with any of that. So we're just say done. Okay, so then the next one here we're going to do is we're going to do email address. So let's add one. And so email address, as we know, is really just text. Now, if we look at data types, you're going to see that there's text and there is email. So what's the difference? It depends. They're both text fields. They both have the same maximum number of characters. Really, the only difference between text and email is how they are handled if you were to use them in a model-driven app. So in a Canvas app, text and email are just plain text fields. There's not a whole lot going on there. If you pull it in with a form, it'll do some automatic formatting, but underlying data structure, it's just a bunch of text. Whether or not you format it as an email, it's really up to you. The model-driven app, because it does a lot of the magic for you, if you make it email, then that makes it a clickable link automatically that they can just take advantage of. They click on it and it launches the mail to, which takes your default mail client, opens it up, and does its thing. So if I was storing the email address and it was just for a Canvas app, or I didn't want a bunch of fancy functionality, store as text. If you want fancy functionality built in and you're going to use it for like a model-driven app, go ahead and use email. So totally up to you here. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to use email. I typically make everything text unless I think otherwise, but because I know that we're going to grow into more later, we're going to do that as email. So there you go. We're going to say done there. So age, email, last name, first name. So the next one I want to do here is hire date. Now dates are super confusing in my opinion. All right. This is one of those places it has all the options to make our lives great, but it's really confusing. So if we go down here, you're going to see that under date and time, we have either date and time or date only. And so if you do date and time, if you want to know exactly the moment they were hired, but the date and the time, great. You could choose that, or you can choose, so let's choose that one first. So date and time. So when you choose date and time, you are going to look at the advanced options for a second. So if I go down here, the behavior, this is where I got very confused. So this one has two different options, user local or time zone independent. So what this is saying is, hey, when you store a date and time into this column, do you want me to store the literal date and time that they used? So whatever they typed in, that is what we want to stick with. That would be time zone independent. Or do you want that date and time zone to understand the time zone? So in other words, we're stored behind the scenes in UTC, but then if somebody opens it up from the Eastern Standard Time, it'll get converted to Eastern Standard Time. If it gets opened by somebody in, I don't even know, in Pacific time zone, then it would show that in their Pacific time zone. So it would be a 3-hour difference between the two numbers, right? So people would see the time based on their local time zone, which causes you guys a lot of grief, right? I have a whole video on time zones are hard. And that is a big part of it. So if you're going to store this, you need to ask yourself, what do I want? Do I want the time zone to be tied? Do I want the time to be tied to the time zone, or do I want it to be tied to the local zone in the local time? So you have to ask yourself that. That's not up to me. I just want you to know the settings are here. Okay. So that would be one way. Now, to add to the confusion, if you choose date only, okay, if you go down here, now you're going to have different options. You've got user local, date only, and time zone independent. Now, user local, same type of thing. When you store a date, it is going to store the date and it's going to bolt on 12 a.m. for that date. So if you store, what's today, January 5th. So January 5th, it'll store at 12 a.m. But then whenever a user looks at it, it will adjust based on the time zone, which can be very confusing because now the date only might be off by a day, right? This is a problem you guys run into. You're like, why are my dates all off by a day? Because they got stored in one time zone and the current time zone they're in pulls it out of that, pulls it to the previous day, right? Because you stored it as UTC at midnight and they got pulled down to Eastern Standard, which is UTC -5. And so that is the previous day at 7 p.m. Super confusing. So that one's a little ugly. So user local, not a huge fan. Date only. This is my favorite one. This one will store just the date, whatever you put in, and it doesn't change it for nothing because it doesn't even include the little 12 p.m. at the end. It is just 1/5/2021. And so no matter what time zone you're in, when you look at it, it'll just say 1/5/2022. Oh, I'm a whole year off. But you get the idea. It ties it to the dates that they put in and it doesn't mess around. Love that one. Time zone independent will also stay with the date that you put in. So if you put it in as 1/5/2021, but it stores it with a 12 a.m. Timestamp, but it is not going to try to automatically update it. So I've always found that if I really just want to store like a higher date where I just want it to be whatever I put in and never change again, I just roll with date only. So up to you guys, a lot of stuff to be done there. I've actually kind of queued up in my brain like a whole video on explaining all that for like 30 minutes. If you think that'd be a good idea, leave comments below and I will add that video to the queue to be made. So anyway, hire date, date only, great. All right, that is hire date, email address. So then there is another one here, add column. We want to be able to take notes on people. And so with notes, you have text, you have text area. So these two actually are the same, right? They can both be expanded, or sorry, text can be expanded out to 4,000 characters. Text area can be expanded out to, I forget the number. It's a big number though. Let's see, let's go down here, text area, maximum length. I want to say it's like 1 million characters. Oh, nope. Text area is only 4,000. I'm completely wrong. Whoops. All right. So text area can only be 4,000 as well. Oh, you know what the difference is between text and text area? Text area handles line breaks and things like that. I don't think I've ever actually used text area. But yeah, the idea is it can take some more formatting type of stuff, whereas text is really just the raw text. But what's more interesting is way down here, multi-line text. That's the one I was thinking of. If you choose multi-line text, this one defaults to 2,000, but if you change this one to a big number, this one can be up to 1 million characters and some change. So this one lets you store more data. So if you need more than 4,000 characters, you're going to want to use multi-line text. Okay. So right now we'll just rock with regular old, and we'll leave it at multi-line. Who cares? But I don't want to really store that many characters, so we'll just make it 5,000. There we go. All right. And then multi-line text also supports the the formatting and that type of stuff as well. So there you go. We'll say done. 2 more. We're almost done, I promise. But hopefully this is helping you guys because you're understanding a little more about these columns, I hope. So we want to add another column. And so one of my favorite things to track with people is their favorite color. I do not know why I'm obsessed with favorite color, but I am. So if we do favorite color, and so for the data type, we're going to choose choice. Now choice versus choices. Choice means they can make one selection. Choices, they can have more than one favorite color. So they can make multi-select. We're not going to get into choices today. That's a little more complex than I want. So we're just going to do a choice. So choose a single one. Now, when you go to do this, if you hit this drop down here, you're going to see a whole bunch of these built-in ones. So these are all the different types of choice, or what they used to call option set, that have already been determined. So like if you created an option set for favorite colors, which I probably have one if we look. Oh, I don't. Yay me. It would show up there, and so then I could just reuse that across multiple tables. So, you know, a little bit like manage metadata almost in Power Apps, kind of. Not exactly, but in that ballpark. But so what we're going to do here is we're going to say, I want to do a new choice. And so we do a new choice. Pro tip, up here at the top, favorite color, right? It's going to default to calling this the same thing. Add the word choices to it. If you don't, it is so hard for you to find it later. It causes a lot of confusion later in your life. So just trust me right now, type in the word choices, your life will be better. And then now we can just do red, blue, and green, right? And we can change these later if we want. But there we go, red, blue, green. We'll say save. After a moment, they finish. I could set a default value. I'm not going to, but you can. And then we kind of have our same type of stuff. So now notice this still says favorite color, right? But this says favorite color choices. That's my super hint for you later. Okay, done. Looks great. And last but not least, we're going to say, are they good at their job? Good at their job. We're going to make this a choice, but if we go to the bottom, there is a yes, no down here. And so then, boom, we have a yes, no, more of that Boolean type of, you know, true, false type of thing. So, yes, no, good at their job, all looks good, done. Okay, so there you go. We have got a bunch of columns for visions. We've hopefully understand some of those different ones. There's a lot more column types to explore and learn in later videos, but that's not for today. So we're going to say save our table. All right, that took about a minute to process all that, but now it's all there. They're all set. So last but not least, before I leave you today, we need to add some data in there. And so, right, and the reason I always want to add a couple of records is it's going to make it easier when we jump over to a Power App, whether it's a Canvas app or a model-driven app, to have some default data just sitting there so we can see things as we kind of build. So what we're going to do is up here at the top, we're going to click on Data, and then we're going to say Edit Data in Excel. We're going to click on this. And so what this is going to do is this is going to generate an Excel file. You can see it showed up over here in my downloads. And so I'm going to click on Open File. Okay, and then after a minute, Excel opens up, or not a minute, it was a few seconds. And so first thing I need to do is enable editing. And so when you do this, you're going to see over here on the right, you'll get this Microsoft Power Apps add-in. If you have to add that or authenticate with it, just kind of follow the prompt. It's pretty straightforward. But what this add-in does is it connects Excel directly to Dataverse. And so the idea now is I can come over here and break out, first name is Nicola. Age is 29, right? Nicola at PowerApps911.com. Her favorite color, there's the little drop down, is green. Is she good at her job? We'll say yes. Keep me out of trouble. Her hire date, cute little calendar, or I could just be like, she was hired on 4/12/2019. Her last name is Young. Notes, we did this. Title is CEO. And there you go. Those are all the different columns that we had done. And so if I then turn around and say publish down here in the bottom right under my head again, this will take that data and push it back up into Dataverse. And so we could then go through, I'm not going to bore you with creating or adding all of these, but I could add a bunch of people right here in here directly. And the beauty of that is now if we go back over here to Dataverse and then we say data, we can see that her record is here. And if we just change this into the custom columns view, we can see that all that data that we just did got pulled in. So now as we start to build out our app, wherever that might be, Power Apps, Canvas, Model, Portal, it doesn't matter, we have some data in there to work with. And I'll be honest, this Excel view, this was a lot of how I learned Power Apps Dataverse, was I was able to come in here and like see things, right? Like I could start to understand what is in these different columns. I would go do different stuff and start to just figure out how these columns worked and connected. And it really helps solidify things in my brain, especially like you start adding relationships, lookups, those type of columns. And then once we're done, we don't need to save this anyway, right? We don't want this file. And we're back over here, yay. So that's all I've got for today, right? Building our first Dataverse table. Hopefully this is at least sparking some ideas. You can go through this. But if you have questions, comments, ideas, where I need to go from here, leave them below, because I do feel like this year we're going to have to embrace Dataverse a little bit more. So we're going to be able to use this table as foundational, right? We got to pull in some relationships, work with those in here. Then we're going to start building out some different apps based off of this, just so we can start to understand more about how all this plumbing works. And so to that end, right, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And of course, if I can do anything to help, hit us up at powerapps911.com. We do all those fun things. We also have a bunch of upcoming training classes that I'd love to see you at. Yeah, and I guess with that, I'm going to say thanks and have a great day. Hey, me again. Before you go, click on the subscribe button, right? Join the list of 100,000 plus people that have subscribed already. Or if you need any help, right, check us out at Power Apps 911. We do big projects, little projects, we do training, we do everything, and we can help you. Or if you want to see more videos, you probably do, then just click on the playlist above. Cool? Thanks, and have a great day.